Here we have the week 13 test, and we're going to be using this as a study guide, not only for the questions that you had on this specific test, but also a study for the future tests. Remember, Concept 13 and Concept 12, both on this test, will show up again on the next two tests. Concept 13 will show up 2 more times. Concept 12 will show up 1 more time. So here we go, problem number 1. In problem 1, this 5 stars, this is something I started this week. This 5 stars tells us how many answers we're looking for. We're looking for 5 different answers on this problem. The first answer is the area of this original figure. We're looking at this information all goes together. So for the original figure, area is always length times width. So we have the 2 times the 5. That is the length times the width. And it's not a bad idea to write that down for yourself when you start the problem. Area is always calculated length times width. And the perimeter is always calculated as the length plus the width plus the length plus the width. One thing that happens sometimes is students forget to do all the way around. They only add 2 sides. So one of the suggestions that we've made a couple times in class is add these additional numbers around the rectangle. So you see 4 different numbers. Then the next step was to find the area and perimeter of the new figure. Well, this new figure, to get the new figure, we have to be looking at the scale factor right here. In this case, the scale factor is 1.5. And what that means is the new figure is 1.5 times the size of the old figure. So to get the new length, we multiply by 1.5, and we get, let me pop my highlighter here. We multiply by 1.5, and we get 7.5. That's our 5 times our scale factor of 1.5, give us 7.5. Our new width is 3. The original width of 2 times the scale factor of 1.5. Once we have those figures now, we can find our new area. Same formula, length times width, 3 times 7.5, gives us 22.5. And the perimeter is 21. That's those 4 added together. And then one thing you were required to do is you were required to actually draw the rectangle. So here's the rectangle itself with those. All right, on to problem number 2. So this is a direct variation problem. You've seen this once before this week. That's why it shows up as a B problem. And in this case, there are 3 different things that we're looking for as answers. Now, the reason there are 3 and not 4 is I specifically said you could not worry about letter C. I wanted you to try it, but we hadn't used that vocabulary, that idea of significance, and so I didn't grade it. So for A, graph the relationship. Well, we have 2 items that we use to graph this relationship. We have what we're given as the weight of 5 crates. So if 5 crates are placed on the truck bed, then it's carrying 600 pounds. So we have the 0.5, 600 right there. And the logic that if no crates are placed on the truck bed, then it's carrying no weight, and that's 0.00 right down here. Using those points, we draw our line. That answers part A. Part B, what's the slope? Well, here is our slope formula. Once again, our slope formula is always slope is y divided by x. In this case, the y is 600 and the x is 500. We can take that right out of this point. And in fact, let's just go ahead and write it right here. The x is the 5. The y is the 600. So we have 600 divided by 5 gives us 120. That's our slope. The answer to C, the one that I said I wasn't going to grade, is that the slope tells you how much each crate weighs. So if you went back and figured out the weight of 1 crate, if you found 1 right here, that would be the point 1 120. And then finally, part D, if the truck had 11 crates on it, how much weight is it carrying? And that is the 11 crates times the 120 for each crate gives us 1,320. Okay, on to the back of our test. And here we go. Ratios with fractions. So this was a 2-star problem. There were two things to do. The first was to figure out the proportion that you would need to solve this. And the proportion is right here. It is the ratio of gas to lawn. The amount of gas needed for the amount of lawn mowed. So it says a half gallon of gas to mow 2/5 of a lawn. What would it take to mow an entire lawn? When we see an entire lawn, we know we're talking about 1. And the unknown, in this case, the thing that we have to find, as always, becomes our x. How many gallons of gas? That's the x value. So we have 1/2 divided by 2/5 equals x over 1, or we could change those to decimal form. 0.5 divided by 0.4 equals x over 1. And then when we do that cross multiplication and we divide by the coefficient, we get 1.25, which can also be the form of 1 1/4. All right, on to the last problems. So direct variations. Again, it's important that you identify the dependent and the independent variables, since in this case it tells us that B spins compared to how much A spins. So when you see that B spins and it varies directly with the number of times A spins. There's that statement right there. When you see that, you know that B is being controlled by A. So what they're telling you is I'm going to write it down here where I've got some space toward the bottom. Wheel A controls wheel B, because B spins depending on how much A spins. So wheel A controls wheel B. If wheel A does the controlling, it is the independent. If wheel B is controlled, it is the dependent. So we divide, as always, constant of variation. Here's our formula right here. Dependent divided by independent. So here are 3 different examples of the dependent being divided by the independent. Each time it gives us 4 over 3. We can write that as the decimal, 1.3, with a line over the top of the 3, because that goes on forever. And then as far as the equation, since it is asking you to find the number of times B spins, given the number of times A spins, we know that B has to be by itself. That's the thing we're trying to find. And the thing you're trying to find is always on a side of the equal sign by itself. All right, so there you go. There are the regular questions on the test. Here was the extra credit question. The answer was B, and you would set up the same proportion. It told you that a 12-pound weight stretches the spring 16.8. So you get a 16.8 stretch, get a better 8 there, with 12 pounds. How far will it stretch? That's the x. So since the stretch was on top, 16.8, there's my x. If a 9-pound weight is applied, there is the last part of my proportion. And when you cross multiply and divide by the coefficient, you get 12.6. So there is something to review before you take the week 14 test. Come back even before you take the week 15 test. Okay? And as always, if you have additional questions, bring them to